In the glamorous yet also egotistical world of classic Hollywood, few rivalries are as symbolic and profound as the hostility between Victor Mature and Richard Burton. On one side was Victor Mature, a rugged, muscular man who openly admitted he was not a real actor, but simply someone doing a job of entertainment. On the other side was Richard Burton, a Shakespearean theatrical genius trained in England, who regarded every performance as a temple of high art. These two extremes might have seemed destined never to collide. Yet when fate brought them together in a massive, epic production, their underlying tensions erupted into one of the most intense confrontations in film history. It was not merely a clash of acting styles, but a battle of pride, professional ethics, and fundamentally different views on what it means to be valuable as a human being. Before the name Victor Mature lit up the neon billboards of Hollywood, he endured a long journey through darkness and hardship. Born in 1913 in Louisville to an Italian-Austrian immigrant family, Victor was not raised in elegant theaters or literary salons. His father was a traveling knife sharpener, and Victor's childhood was shaped by the exhausting rhythm of working-class survival. He experienced the bitterness of poverty firsthand, taking on any job he could to survive, selling candy on street corners with freezing hands, and performing the hardest manual labor without complaint. When Victor decided to head to California with only a few dollars in his pocket, he carried no illusions of glamorous fame. He went with the instinct of a tradesman searching for a craft to make a living. He even slept in a makeshift tent in the backyard of the Pasadena Community Playhouse, working as a cleaner while quietly observing rehearsals and absorbing experience through silent but sharp observation. This working-class background shaped a unique philosophy that later astonished Hollywood. Victor Mature became famous for a level of honesty that shocked many. He never treated acting as a sacred art temple. To him, every film was a contract, every scene a shift at work. He once stunned critics with a self-deprecating line that became legendary: "I'm not an actor, and I have 64 films to prove it." This humility was not insecurity, but the pride of a man who understood the value of honest labor. When World War II broke out, right as his career was rising, he did not hesitate to leave the spotlight and join the Coast Guard, directly participating in dangerous naval operations. When he returned, Victor carried himself differently, grounded, stoic, and full of the vitality of someone who had truly faced life and death. From his portrayal of the brooding Doc Holliday in My Darling Clementine to his role as the muscular hero Samson, Victor Mature won audiences over through sincerity and realism. He did not rely on complex acting techniques or abstract theories. He connected through the eyes of a man who had lived through poverty, through the body of a laborer, and through the heart of someone who valued every opportunity under the sun. This identity as a working actor became his strongest shield, but also the root of his inability to compromise with Richard Burton's arrogance. Fate brought these two opposing forces together in 1953 on the set of the epic The Robe, the first film shot using CinemaScope technology. Richard Burton, then a rising star from the London stage, was cast as the lead Marcellus. Victor Mature played the slave Demetrius. Officially, they were collaborators. In reality, the set became a battlefield of mutual contempt. From the very beginning of filming, Richard Burton made no effort to hide his disdain for Mature. With his deeply ingrained theatrical elitism, Burton looked down on actors who rose through physical presence and commercial appeal. He viewed Victor Mature as nothing more than a talking slab of meat, a lucky man who gained fame through looks rather than skill. Burton frequently made biting remarks about Mature's abilities, implying he was nothing more than a commercial product of Hollywood, unworthy of standing alongside a true Shakespearean artist. Burton's arrogance eventually crossed a line and turned into deeply personal insults. For Victor, a man who grew up in hunger and poverty, acting was not about psychological analysis or critical recognition. It was a job that brought dignity, enjoyment, and bread to the table. When Burton belittled his profession, Mature felt as though his entire life of honest struggle was being trampled. This conflict of artistic purpose created an unbridgeable gap. While Burton pushed toward technical brilliance, sometimes excessively so in order to impress intellectual circles, Mature chose simplicity and sincerity. He believed an actor's duty was to emotionally connect with ordinary working-class audiences, not to satisfy the ego of self-proclaimed geniuses. The burning glare Victor Mature directed at Richard Burton in several scenes of The Robe was not entirely acting. It was the genuine frustration of a principled man confronted with arrogance. The hostility between Victor Mature and Richard Burton did not only stem from on-set insults, it was rooted deeply in their completely opposing definitions of responsibility. For Victor Mature, who had once sold candy and done hard labor to survive, a film set was a workshop, and he was a skilled worker. He always arrived earliest, knew his lines down to every comma, and kept his wardrobe impeccable. Mature respected the money producers invested and the time of hundreds of crew members behind the camera. He believed professional ethics meant respecting the collective. Conversely, Richard Burton, despite possessing a natural talent that made the world bow in admiration, represented the indulgence and sometimes the lack of discipline of a self-absorbed genius. Burton often arrived on set with bloodshot eyes, his breath heavy with alcohol after nights of non-stop partying. To Burton, acting was spontaneous inspiration, and he allowed himself the right to be erratic, forcing the entire crew to wait in exhaustion. When Victor Mature saw Burton struggling through hangovers during working hours, he did not feel admiration for that talent. He felt deep contempt. In his eyes, it was a betrayal of all the hard-working people who were struggling to make the film. That distance became even more severe as Hollywood entered an era of sensational scandals. The turbulent, chaotic, and heavily publicized relationship between Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor later became the final straw. In Mature's eyes, he looked at the lavish parties, the public arguments, and Burton's oversized ego as a symbol of decay within the film industry. Mature saw it as a fake Hollywood, where genuine values were replaced by cheap personal drama. For a man who always kept himself away from glamour and chose a quiet family life, Burton's lifestyle was not just unfamiliar, it was an insult to honest working people. Normally, Victor Mature was known as a generous, calm man who rarely held grudges over minor issues. However, with Richard Burton, he was a rare exception. That bitterness lingered for many years, even when they no longer shared the same screen. Mature rarely named Burton directly in interviews, but he often used pointed remarks aimed at actors who considered themselves geniuses and looked down on others. He once sarcastically said, "Some people spend their whole lives acting like a great actor, while I simply work to earn a living." It was a quiet but powerful act of retaliation from a man confident in his own worth. While Richard Burton continued chasing Oscars, glory filled with brilliance but also self-destruction through alcohol, Victor Mature made a decision that shocked Hollywood. At the age of 46, while still a sought-after box office star, he chose to walk away from the spotlight. There were no grand announcements, no emotional farewell parties. He quietly packed his belongings and returned to a simple life in Rancho Santa Fe. Mature chose to spend the rest of his life among the green golf courses and the quiet stability of family life. He left while his fame was still at its peak, refusing to be eroded by vanity or meaningless ego battles. This departure became the final proof of his life philosophy. Hollywood was just one chapter of life, and once the work was done, the worker simply went home to rest. Meanwhile, Burton continued to struggle with roles and inner pain until the end of his life. Mature's peace in old age became the sweetest victory over the arrogance of his former rival. Victor Mature passed away in 1999, leaving behind a vast career of more than 60 films and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Although once looked down upon by intellectual colleagues like Burton, time proved that Mature had won the hearts of ordinary audiences. He did not need complex acting techniques to become a strong Samson or a loyal Demetrius. He only needed sincerity and a powerful life force radiating from within himself. The feud between Victor Mature and Richard Burton is not just an anecdote of personal hostility, but a profound lesson about the boundaries of self-respect. It proves that even the most calm and humble individuals have a red line that cannot be crossed when faced with arrogance and pretension. Mature showed the world that you do not need to call yourself a serious artist to earn respect. Dedication to work and personal integrity are what create a lasting legend. In the end, Richard Burton may have won the debates about acting technique, but Victor Mature was the one who won in life. He lived a complete life, left in peace, and left behind the image of one of Hollywood's most down-to-earth and humble stars. The old feud closed with a reminder that true greatness does not lie in how loudly you proclaim it, but in how you treat those who walk the same path with you.